Okay, I wanted to add one more thing. I'm inserting the clip of me at the Philips telemetry site visit where I made the hearts and I talk about Vanguard and Burroughs. But there was one thing that I don't think I actually included in that chat because it actually happened after I left the telemetry. And on the other side of the street, as I'm driving out like half a block up from the intersection, I noticed to my right that there's this unique sculpture in another parking lot, office building parking lot. So I pull over, and for people who are listening and can't see it, essentially it's metal on a stone plinth in the middle of a bunch of grass on the literally just the edge of the office parking lot, and it's two cubes that are they're not solid, they're like lines and they're on an angle, so like tumbling, sort of like dice, two, and then they're connected by spiral loops. There's a bigger spiral loop that connects the two cubes that are open cubes, and then in the topmost cube is another spiral coming out that's attached. And that sculpture, it's very dynamic, and at the base I took a photograph. It's good that I remembered, and it's Obi Simonis. Was the artist, and it says 1999 to 2000, and the title of it is Dualism, copyright. So I wanted to point that out here. It is up close. You can see the Dualism title there. And I thought it stood out. And at the time, I remember like texting Severus. I'm like, can you believe like I'm in the parking lot? Look at the statue. It's so strange. Again, imprinting all of this. But so it reminded me today as I'm putting this all together. When I was looking up dualism, one of the first things that came up was the Cathars, which is here in my Sega map here. And how did I end up with even having the Cathars in my map? Well, if you remember back to Cesar Hidalgo, who was a professor at MIT in collective learning, and he was the one promoting augmented democracy, right? So these tokens and your AI would do the tokens. And we know that that's sort of communication in the superorganism, not really about voting per se. And Cesar Hidalgo came out of Chile originally. He grew up in Chile, and that's where Cybersyn, Allende was working with Stafford Beer on Cybersyn, like automated government, and which is certainly not liberation. You bring in the English cybernetician and to run your government, but then the Chicago boys come in and shake the can and everything is, broken up. So he grew up in Chile and then came to the US to study. I'm trying to remember. Oh, so he got his PhD, I see here, University of Notre Dame. So again, Catholic and connected to all of the Catholic impact investing stuff. And he was a professor, a lecturer and visiting professor at Harvard in the School of Engineering and the School of Government. And then later was the principal investigator, director, founder of this thing, I believe at MIT, called the Center for Collective Learning, Data Visualization and Applied AI, and created something called the data wheel, automated reporting visualization. And so this Center for Collective Learning and Data Visualization, which again, you think of all the things that are being automated, including, supposedly images of your aura. And that program eventually closed down at MIT, and he is then relocated to Toulouse, France. And the program was called ANITI, ANITI, Artificial and Natural Intelligence, Toulouse Institute. And it was affiliated with the University of Toulouse. So at the time I was like, well, let me look at what's Toulouse about. That's kind of an interesting jump from Cambridge out to France. And so the biggest thing that Toulouse is known for is that it was a stronghold of the Cathars. And the Cathars were a heretical Christian sect that were persecuted by the Catholic Church and sort of connected to Gnosticism. And they were targeted by the Albigensian Crusades, Pope Innocent III in 1229. And I guess a big part of what they did was they burned them at the stake, because that's what you do with heretics, is that you burn them at the stake. And I guess the Dominican order was founded to confront the Cathars. And Toulouse, France today is actually also known as Aerospace Valley. And so between Bordeaux and Toulouse are a lot of aerospace industries. So of course that kind of connects with our inner space, outer space, interdimensional token bridges, right? And so it all kind of starts coming together. So Yeah, so Simonis, he did predominantly like metal sculptures. He spends his time between Massachusetts and the West Coast. So he grew up in Eastern Oregon and attended Portland State and studied sculpture. And it said that he studied under Frederick Littmann and James Hansen. And Littmann trained under Maillot in the French Romantic tradition of bronze figurative work, and Hansen was a modernist but had traces of native Northwest Indian culture in his symbolism. And this gallery talks about him, Simonis, getting a commission in 2008 for the Central Square Theatre of Cambridge in Massachusetts to fabricate a sculptural gateway and marquee for their new theater on the MIT campus. So again, we've got theater and gateways and portals in MIT. And it talks about balancing curvilinear and angular form is sort of a focus of Simonis's work. And here we see a Facebook post. I'm not sure how old this Facebook post is. Fairly recent, September of 2022. And he is unveiling a sculpture which has a rock, and then on it an equilateral triangle, a man-made equilateral triangle that's blue, called the Mind and Matter sculpture. So it kind of goes with everything that we're talking about in terms of like sacred geometry, mind and matter. And so when I was looking into dualism and the Cathars, what it said was, it's kind of an interesting article from 2015 called Fires in History, the Cathar Heresy, the Inquisition, and Brulology, which I guess is about fire, people being burned at the stake. And so, so they were burned on pyres, the Cathars, for, essentially a lot of people talk about them like Western Buddhists. And the dualism that they espoused was the idea of, light, dark, good, evil. It says that it's an heir to Manichaeism, a dualist philosophy dating from the 3rd century, founded by Manes or Mani, born in 216 AD in Babylonia or Persia. And it says it originates in the Middle East, holding the absolute duality exists between two principles, good, evil, spirit and the flesh, light and darkness, God and Satan. It is a syncretic form of Zoroastrianism, an ancient Iranian religion dating from around 600 BC, derived from Mazdaism, which originated on the banks of the Indus, and of Gnosticism, 3rd century AD. It was considered as the most fearsome enemy of all other religions, and Christianity in particular. And so in the aspect of dualism, they pretty much essentially they understood physical matter and body as evil and spirit as good, and sort of within this idea that our life is sort of almost like reincarnation, and that we're supposed to show up until we can get over our material reality selves and aspire to this higher plane. And so among their practices, they were pacifists, so that didn't go over well in the Middle Ages, and they didn't submit to, they didn't agree to baptism or the crucifixion or any of those things because they believed that was material and therefore evil. They didn't believe in sexual relations between men and women because they felt that was simply perpetuating a bad cycle. And they were vegetarians and and again, peace. And so all of that, the Albigensian Crusade was launched against them. And then I need to look into this a little bit more, but evidently there are aspects, and again, the esoteric stuff isn't my strong suit, but linking the Cathars to Mary Magdalene and the Knights Templar and King Arthur, that's sort of woven through the aspects of Cathar history. And Carcassonne, which I think I've always thought was kind of cool, these various castles in France, in Languedoc, were connected to the Cathars. So again, I forgot to add this in, and I had never actually stopped to really look up Simonis and remind myself about the dualism, because at the time I wasn't prepared to talk about dualism and monads and all of these aspects of reality that we're sort of dealing with. But thinking about dualism and then going back and revisiting Cesar Hidalgo and his sort of journey through Chile and Notre Dame and then to MIT and doing these token dated visualizations and then landing in Toulouse, which is both aerospace and Cathars and dualism, I thought it was worth throwing that in there, that these sculptures sort of throw themselves up into your consciousness. Again, this was just opposite the parking lot of the Philips Biotelemetry Center. And, the cubes look very much like everything we keep seeing around blockchain, and then you tip them, and then they have the hexagon component and the spiral dynamics and spintronics and everything. So, he might just say that dualism is like curves and lines or something like that, our body and spirit. But it's you could also look at it, and you could look at some of the other more interesting aspects of mind and matter.